Royal Altdorf Gryphites, the best warriors that the Empire can offer, clad in the regal blue golden armor, covered in their unique snow white leopard fur. These guys are absolutely terrifying to face on the battlefield. They are actually a rather risky unit to pick, so you don't really see them on ladder, as their low model count often means that they can take quite a bit of damage when charged by cavalry or monsters, which is exactly what they're supposed to face. So people would just go for alternatives like missiles and infantry. And I've been thinking, how do you make Gryphites great again? Well, the answer is simple. You give them every single buff you can find and just turn them into the unstoppable killing machines they're supposed to be. This is Tactical Lich here, and welcome to another episode of Army Testing Logs. And yes, today we'll be fielding a build revolving around these regiment of renowned Demigryph Knights of the Empire. And we'll be doing 2 replays today. So yeah, buckle up and see how these guys tear down the enemies of Empire. For the first replay, we have an Empire versus Bretonnia combat. For the Bretonians, we have a front line of peasant mobs, a couple peasant bowmen with pox arrows at the back, a field trebuchet. Leadership department, we have Faye Enchantress and her couple paladin bodyguards. And of course, you can't call yourself a Bretonnian army without, well, knights. So, companions of Quenelle, Grail Knights, and a couple questing knights. These guys armor-piercing, great combat stats, anti-large on Grail Knight, so on a head-on charge, they would absolutely destroy the Empire Cavalry. Even for Royal Altdorf Gryphites, if they take a charge, the number superiority on these guys will definitely overwhelm the Royal Altdorf Gryphites. So as for the Empire, we have a very narrow build. A front line of Flagellants with Sigmar Sons, unbreakable, great at clearing out peasant chaff, backed up by some spearmen with shields. In the middle, a steam tank accompanied by a Jade Wizard. For our, well, death squad little contingent here, the core of the army, Count Franz, the Emperor himself, with a Warrior Priest. These two are amazing at giving out buffs. Warrior Priest able to turn a lot of stuff around him resistant to damage, while Count Franz and Warrior Priest combined can give out a huge attack buff. So yeah, these guys will be our main forces against the numerous Bretonnian cavalry. And they will have a lot of heavy lifting to do. And finally, a unit of Empire Knights, highly armored, pretty resistant to damage as well, but not really good at dealing with cavalry in turn. So that's about it for the army comms. Let the battle begin. The battle begins with both armies not quite visible to each other, so the Bretonnian army is now pushing forward, while the Empire army is now sending the Empire Knights over to get a visual on the Bretonnian army. Here, we have the Bretonnian player making a mistake here. While these guys are in lance formation, their ranks will be rather deep and perfect for a steam tank pot shot. That took out 6 models in the shot. Pretty ridiculous damage. But now I'll do a bit of fast forwarding, as it will just be steam tank moving forward, trying to get some pot shots in, while the Bretonnian army desperately pushing forward. And here we have the paladins going for a cheeky snipe against the light wizard, Jade Wizard. But that probably would have succeeded if not for the presence of the hero core now. Just probably charging in, surrounding one of the paladins. As you can see, this one paladin got eaten alive by the combined might of Count Franz, Warrior Priest, and some Royal Altdorf Gryphites. The other one got charged by a steam tank, but took a bit of damage, but nothing substantial. Nothing really to trap him down on the ground, so I just try to snipe out and finish off the other paladin instead. And yeah, this guy is not getting away. One last hammer smashing the skull of this paladin, and he is gone. Now it's just a little bit more skirmishing and harassment, some trebuchet rocks dropping in, steam tanks still taking pot shots, while the questing knights are just feinting their charge, trying to lure out the Empire Knights. Peasants are now in the engagement range, and as my cavalry corps is over here on the left flank, my opponents shift around his perfect condition Grail Knights and Companions of Quenelle. Pretty much perfect for destroying the Royal Altdorf Gryphites in normal condition. Peasants are now firing into the unshielded flagellants, taking some health off them before charging in with a line of peasants. And now even questing knights are going into fray, using their anti-large stats to destroy these flagellants, but they are unbreakable and they will hold. And over here, I was a little bit slow on my reaction, so these Royal Altdorf Gryphites didn't really get a clean charge, while the companions got perfect charge on the Royal Altdorf Gryphites. But with the support with the Empire Knights as well as the two characters, the companions are taking massive damage from a counter charge. And the Royal Altdorf Gryphites in return did not really take much, as I have my warrior priest around providing scroll of shielding and shield of faith, giving them a combined 44%, whooping 44% damage resistance. That's basically half the damage they're supposed to take. And with the increased melee defense, they're definitely taking less than half the damage from the companions. The Grey Knights actually charged the wrong target here. They're sorely needed in this engagement, and now the companions of Canal are not really holding their ground. A comment right into the face of these Altdorf Gryphites, and they're still standing in full unit size. Yeah, this is actually quite amazing with that 44% damage resistance. And now with a regrowth and Earthblood, they will be healed back up to their full health. And yeah, fighting in just perfect condition, as this Jade Wizard is now sadly hunted down by the Paladin. Over here, the grind is still going on, as the Unbreakable Infantry are now still holding back a ton of questing knights, while the Spearmen with shields running in to reinforce, keep piling on to dragging down these knights. And yeah, Empire Knights whipping around, charging into the backs of these Grail Knights and just trying to bog them down. Paladin, who hunted down the Jade Wizard earlier, is now being hunted, and vengeance is exacted on these Paladins instead. And with the Paladin forced off, the Gryphites are now free to roam again, charging into these Grail Knights, breaking them, freeing up the Empire Knights into the backlines of the Bretonnia, going rampage and eating the peasant bowmen for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever the time of the day it is. And basically, it is pretty much over for Bretonnia, I would say, as these companions are now caught by the very healthy Royal Altdorf Gryphites, and the Empire Knights are free to roam at the backlines of the Bretonnia. Now finishing off one peasant bowman, going into the backs of the other. Trebuchet is actually desperately trying to fire into the Royal Altdorf Gryphites and doing some really solid work, taking apart models, giving them finally the first casualties in the whole game, and with every drop of the rock. But the only real pocket of resistance here is just the Fae Enchantress herself, with some wavering peasants and questing knights. So not really much can be done by the Bretonnian player, as the Paladin dropped in, wavered, and army losses is triggered. So yeah, there you go for the first replay. Now let's look at the post-battle screen. Calfrons did pretty okay. Probably did most of the damage against the Paladin and some knights. Warrior Priest mostly there for buffing, so it's alright. Spearmen with shields. This one probably the one who helped back a bunch of questing knights and peasants, so just did some solid work. The unbreakable frontline, well, they are there for just an unbreakable speed bump anyway, so mainly there to take the charges and hold the line, so they did a good job. Empire Knights rampaging through the back line and doing some pretty decent counter punch against the companions of Canal, so yeah, did some pretty good work, and definitely the MVP of the game, Royal Altdorf Gryphites, charging the companions of Canal, charging the Paladins, charging the Grail Knights, doing some really solid heavy lifting, armor piercing, anti-large damage, getting almost 2.5k of gold value out of there, so really proud of these guys. Especially with all these buffs going on, they really turned into the unstoppable killing machine they should be. And Steam Tank did some solid work as well, picking off a lot of questing knights and just being the unbreakable brick wall of the Empire army, anchoring the middle line of the army. As for the Bretonnians, yeah, Fade was mostly fighting a bunch of States troops, so couldn't really take much damage out of the infantry, while the Comet really didn't do much there. So not really good time for her. This one Paladin probably hunted down the Jade Wizard, so as well as just charging the Steam Tank in the back. So did some solid work there. This one got sniped out early, so the rest here, peasants, Real Reliquary didn't do much. These peasant bowmen actually fired consistently into the fray for quite a bit of time, probably why all my flagellants died out, as they were just doing some consistent fire, picking at the Steam Tank and the Royal Altdorf Gryphites. As for the Knight Corps of the Bretonnian army, they got absolutely wrecked. So yeah, pretty good stuff for the Empire. Now let's have a look at the second replay. So for the second battle here, we have a little bit of a grudge match, Chaos versus Empire. For the Chaos army, we have a Marauder frontline with Mirror Guard mixed in, flanked by some Forsaken, one of them the Demon Spew with Poison Attack ROR variant. At the back, we have a triple Marauder Horseman with throwing axes. These guys extremely agile and with their AP missiles can do some hefty damage against our Demigryphs, so gotta be careful with that. Also, we have some Chaos Warriors with great weapons here, just as a backup. For the leadership, we have Prince Sigvo the Magnificent, the Prince of Slaanesh, always holding the line till the end, being the absolute anchor of the Chaos army, being the last one standing as well, even carrying some games on his back all by himself. So pretty scary stuff. Dragon Ogre Shaggoth for that anti-large armor piercing, monster mashing power. Chaos Warriors, Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows. At the corners of the map, 3 Chaos Warhounds. As for the Empire army, we have a main line of unbreakable troops, flagellants to most of them, with 1 Sigmar Sons, spearmen surrounding the range corps for some flank protection, as well as being reserve troops. For range capacity, we have some archers to countershoot the Marauder Horsemen, and Hellblaster volley guns. These guys can do some pretty good burst damage against infantry and large monsters. So yeah, definitely better than slowly shooting with some cannons, in my opinion. Empire Knights at the back to fan off some mobility, and here we have our Demigryph Death Squad riding alongside some Warrior Priests and Volkmar Grim. The reason I picked Volkmar Grim over Karl Franz here is because this guy has even more insane buffs. Grand Shield of Faith, Grand Hammer of Sigmar. The effects are essentially the same as the Shield of Faith and Hammer of Sigmar, but the thing is, the name is a little bit different, and they also have a little bit longer duration. So essentially, they are basically 2 different effects on technical terms, and as such, they can stack. Now, throw in another Scroll of Shielding, and the Demigryphs will shoot able to have 66% of damage resistance, and if you're feeling spicy for the day, you can even throw in a Shield of Thorns, bumping it up to 88%. But today we didn't bring that on our Jade Wizard, because I also brought the dollars below in case I need to do some block busting. So that's basically it for the army comps. Now let's get straight into battle. The battle started with Chaos Army pushing forward, putting the Mirror Guard into the firing range of these Hellblaster volley guns, so promptly started blasting, picking off a few models from the elite Chaos Warriors, but then the Marauder Horsemen surged forward. So since the AP missiles and their high speed are more of a threat to the Royal Altdorf Gryphites, the target will be promptly switched to these Marauder Horsemen, and after that it's just skirmishing action, so did a little bit fast forwarding right there, and now infantry lines are finally clashing. Marauders surging into these flagellants, getting beaten back since they take quite a bit of hefty damage from the frenzy fanatics of Sigmar. Over here, this might be a little bit finicky for the Empire infantry line, as Spearmen with shields cannot hold against Demon Spew. So Royal Altdorf Gryphites and the double priest of Sigmar coming in for assistance, actually doing massive damage onto the Demon Spew with charge damage and the so-far bombardment. Now this gets a little bit scary for the Royal Altdorf Gryphites since they took a bunch of damage from the high attack of this Demon Spew and the Marauders, as well as some a little bit of chip damage from the Marauder Horsemen, and now they took a charge from these Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. Well, on paper, this guy can one-shot a single Royal Altdorf Gryphite models, as they have like 200 something, almost 300 health per unit model. And with the 320 armor-piercing weapon damage, plus bonus versus large, plus base weapon damage, these guys would have taken a lot of damage on one hit. But then you have Volkmar and the Warrior Priest in the fray, so giving him Shield of Faith, Scroll of Shooting, and Grand Shield of Faith, the damage resistance on these guys are now up to 66%, basically cutting down the damage intake to 1/3. So divide the armor-piercing damage by 3, you have like something around 100 damage per hit. Now that might still be quite hefty, but that's far from enough to kill off a single unit model and lower the damage output of these Royal Altdorf Gryphites. And whatever damage is dealt, there is a live wizard right here to heal it back up. So yeah, Dragon Ogre Shaggoth may be in a favorable engagement on paper, but definitely not favorable enough. With a lot of his damage from his big ol' axe getting negated, allowing the Royal Altdorf Gryphites to fight with full strength, especially with a regrowth refreshing their vigor. Yeah, they totally are fighting in perfect condition right now. The Chaos Warhounds are a little bit late to surge in, and now they are subject to a countercharge from these Royal Altdorf Gryphites who free themselves up after breaking up the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth with the help of Hell Blaster Volley Gun blasting in the back of this scary monster, and then terrifying the hounds. They are now fleeing off the backline. Over here, Forsaken broken the Spearman wall, but Empire Knights are ready to charge in, just stopping them in their tracks, but that leaves an opening for some Marauder Horsemen to charge in and silence the Hellblaster Volley Gun. But thankfully, the leaders of the Empire along their Royal Altdorf bodyguards are now free to charge in after freeing themselves from the Chaos Warhound and just breaking off these Marauder Horsemen as well. Still have 14 unit models able to do some pretty good damage, but then they're broken now and totally not coming back. Other than that, the front line of the Empire is actually in tatters right now. Sigmar Sons just got wiped out, and everything that's holding back the Warriors of Chaos are these tattered flagellants, these wavering spearmen against the Mirror Guard and Prince Sigvold. And with some archers doing some fire support against the Sorcerer and Marauder Horsemen, yeah, this is not looking too hot right now. But then, after escorting the Marauder Horsemen off the battlefield, Royal Altdorf Gryphites are returning to engage again, along with Volkmar and the Warrior Priest. But then the whole front lines is basically gone by now. So Sigvold and his Mirror Guard are now surging forward, going after these Hellblaster Volley Gun, who remanned the artillery, but now getting pushed up once again. Over here, Royal Altdorf Gryphites charge into the backs of these Chaos Warriors. With the weapon damage buff from the Warrior Priest, they are now up to 53 weapon strength and should be killing off a single Chaos Warrior model in like a couple hits. Especially with the charge bonus and all that good stuff going on for them. But here, Mirror Guard and Sigvold are now surging in, trying to bog down the Royal Altdorf Gryphites, and yes, they actually did somehow bog them down a bit for now, as they return to charge back into the engagement. But with all the Shield of Faith, Grand Shield of Faith, they should be taking minimal damage from the Chaos Warriors. As the Warrior Priest of Sigmar going fisticuffs against Sigvold the Magnificent. Not a favorable engagement, but yeah, it will have to do for now to just tank out some damage from Prince Sigvold. Empire Knights coming in for a lancing charge to the backs of the Chaos Warriors, the Mirror Guard, but the elite units of Chaos would not break. But then a pendulum actually broke their own back, so friendly fire definitely something to be accounted for. Empire Knights returning for a Psycho Charge, going to the backs of these fleeing Mirror Guard now, leaving Sigvald alone, and right now, things are getting pretty comfortable for Empire with all the Chaos units in tatters. The only thing holding it together is Prince Sigvald the Magnificent, who is pretty hard to take down with this kind of build. That's why sometimes I would like to bring Karl Franz instead, because he is such a great character sniper assassin with his Galmaraz and right climb Runefang buffing up the attacks and all that. While Sigvald it can just tank out Volkmar and the Warrior Priest. So right now the better course of action is just clean up, using the mobility advantage to chase down Sorcerer, using the Royal Altdorf Gryphites to clean up the routing infantry. Now with the Sorcerer blocked down, it's pretty safe to say that everything other than Sigvald is gone, and with everything rather healthy around the vicinity, even Sigvald being so healthy is not unbreakable, and that basically is army losses. So now here we are at the post-battle screen. Let's look at the second battle's army performances. For the Empire, the leaders really didn't do much since they're there to buff up the Demigryph Knights anyways. State troops did okay. Sigmar Sons held their ground. The archers actually did surprisingly well, seeing how they counterfired against the Marauder Horsemen and just earning quite a bit of value and shooting at the Sorcerer as well. As for the Empire Knights, they were there to protect the back line, and they did exactly that, holding back the Forsakens and then charging into the rears of the Chaos Warriors, breaking off some routing units. Did some solid work. Hellblaster Volley Gun earned quite a bit of their value from shooting the Mirror Guard, Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, and Marauder Horsemen. And of course, we have our MVP of the day, Royal Altdorf Gryphites, earning over 2,000 value, slaughtering all the Chaos troops. Their terror comes in really handy as it broke off some Chaos Warhounds, stopping them from doing some decisive damage to the backline of Empire. They also broke off some Marauder Horsemen who were trying to shut down the backlines of Empire as well. So, of course, they also devoured this Dragon over Shaggoth, so did some pretty important heavy lifting right then and there. As for the Chaos Army, most of the units didn't really do well, other than Mirror Guard, really effective melee combatants right there. Forsaken got shut down by the Cavalry of Empire, and of course we have Sigvald the Magnificent right here, being the last man standing of a Chaos Army, but just not enough to carry the game. So that's about it for today's battle replays. Let's have a look at a more detailed army breakdown. This build is actually made under a very simple line of thought. Basically, I'm just trying to see how many buffs can I put onto a single unit. And that is what happened. For this build, you want to have a bunch of supporting characters. Karl Franz works as well, Volkmar works as well, it doesn't matter. As long as you think it suits the situation, you pick them, bring them with all their buffs. Right line Runefang, Galmaraz is for sniping, but like other stuff like stand your ground, hold the line for Karl Franz, or for Volkmar, all his prayers. Not necessarily the Soulfire Bombardment, but definitely the other two prayers, definitely more important. For Warrior Priest, you want to have his prayers as well. Shield of Faith, Hammer of Sigmar, they are mainly there to be buffing your key units. And for the Warrior Priest, always remember to bring the Scroll of Shooting to maximize the damage resistance you can get. And for sometimes you should bring Banner of Eternal Flame, sometimes you shouldn't, depending on the situation. Like say, if you expect to go against Fireborn, then yeah, don't do that. They have like 70% of fire resistance, so maybe you have 8% base damage, base weapon damage increase, but that's not gonna do much here. Anyways, for the rest of the army, it's rather flexible. I personally like the unbreakable front line, so I just dump a bunch of Flagellants and Sigmar Sons in front. But yeah, you can switch out for swordsmen or just more spears in general. As for the range core, it doesn't really matter as well, as long as you think it's gonna work. So I brought steam tanks for Bretonnia, or I just switch out to Hellblaster Volley Guns, or maybe even Sunmaker if I feel like dealing with other factions with some other methods. So of course you need the star unit of this build, the MVP of both games, Royal Altdorf Gryphites. Technically you can buff other units the same way as well, but since these are the best that the Empire roster can offer, might as well just use them to make the most value out of the damage they tank, right? Because when you look into the Cavalry department, these guys are definitely the best in melee against monsters and whatnot. And then you look into the infantry department, and the best you get is basically greatswords. Yes, they are decent infantry, especially against like armored infantry, but they can't really carry the game on their backs like Royal Altdorf Gryphites did. So I would say the better way to do it is just to maximize the potential of this one single unit and let them carry the game for you. And of course, for spells, you want Jade Wizard simply for their amazing regrowth. Or if you feel like extra spicy and wants to go all in on that damage resistance path, you can also throw in Shield of Thorns. Give them another 22% of physical resistance, and bam, you have unit that takes like only 12% of damage every time they take a hit. But yeah, so basically that's about it for how you put the build together. Of course, you want something to take the charge for your Royal Altdorf Gryphites, either to pin in enemy cavalry units or just eat the charge for your Demogryph Knights, so the Demogryph Knights can circle around or just charge into the backs of their own men to dish out the damage they should be dealing. And Empire Knights, at the price of 850, providing 110 armor is definitely the best choice you can get on the Empire roster. Decently priced and also very tanky as a cavalry. They can certainly take a bit of punishing and then act as an extra mobility unit to fend off enemy skirmishers or something and whatnot. This build is especially useful against any monster mashing factions, say the Norskins, Bretonians, who not exactly monster smashing, but their hordes and hordes of knights coming after your skirmishers and frontline can be rather scary, and Demogryph Knights fully buffed up can totally destroy them in a matter of seconds, as you could see what they did to those companions of Canal. And the damage resistance coming from the leaders of your army can provide a lot more leeway for healing as well, since every hit you take takes away less HP. So every bit of HP for your Royal Altdorf Gryphites can be utilized more efficiently, as every hit they take is actually costing them less HP. In the same amount of time, they're doing the same damage or even more, as they keep their models number count high. They can be very good even when taking a charge from some monsters or cavalry. Of course, there are multiple weaknesses as well. For example, in the Volkmark the Grim build, they struggle to kill off Prince Sigmar, simply because they do not have enough single entity killing power in this build. And that is why I picked Karl Franz sometimes, simply because he's such a good single character sniper. So here we have another appearance of Sigvald coming in against Karl Franz, charging him head on with his rapier out, shields up, but then a counter charge from the warrior priest and the surround of Karl Franz, with those Demogryph Knights coming in from the far side for support, separates him from his fellow soldiers, and now he's surrounded by a bunch of armor-piercing entities. This is actually why I sometimes pick Karl Franz over Volkmark, simply because Karl Franz is such a good duelist, using his armor-piercing damage to punch a hole onto the most sturdy enemy characters. Even Sigvald took a beating from Karl Franz with Galmaraz in his hands. And if that was Volkmark, as you can see from the second replay, they barely made a dent in Sigvald's HP. So that's why with this build, sometimes you have to kind of balance out the need for tankiness in terms of that extra damage resistance or the killing power that you require to actually win the game. So other major weaknesses of this point is Demogryph Knights. Yes, they are a great unit to rely on, but then they also can be easily overwhelmed by numbers as they have a very small unit size. With only 24 models in a full unit, simply surrounded by spearmen can mean great trouble for these guys. Of course, they also rely heavily on their armor for defense, so any armor-piercing missiles, such as the Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, or something like Sisters of Averlorn, can shoot them to pieces if they got separated and focused down. As we can see over here, the Royal Altdorf Gryphites are surrounded by a bunch of Lizardmen infantry now. Some of them even the elites of the Star Chamber Guardians, and getting shot to pieces, pelted down by these Greenskins darts, getting shot to pieces. And yeah, getting netted is stationary, and getting shot is not a good way to go for a Royal Altdorf Gryphites. So let's do a quick summary on how to apply this build in actual practice. First of all, you need to pick your engagements well. Royal Altdorf Gryphites can beat most if not all monsters head on, especially with their buffs. So use the mobility of your characters and cavalry well, shifting around, picking only favorable engagements, and destroy any monsters, cavalry, infantry, whatnot, as long as you know you can win it. Otherwise, the low model count of the Royal Altdorf Gryphites means that they can be easily surrounded and bogged down by the lowliest chaff infantry. And that is where you basically lose your Royal Altdorf Gryphites, as one of their main advantages over normal Empire Cavalry is they are actually the faster variant. And yeah, never separate your units. Always stick the Royal Altdorf Gryphites together with your leaders, as they provide your Royal Altdorf Gryphites with buffs, while the Royal Altdorf Gryphites protect them from getting sniped out by monsters or any single entity units. The second thing is you need to time your buffs well. First of all, the buffs only last so long, and if you don't time them together, allow them to maximize the attack, defense, and all the stats of your demogryphs, you're basically losing the point of using this build. Since this build is all about making the Royal Altdorf Gryphites unstoppable killing machines. And secondly, to maximize the benefit of the buffs, they have to be used together to win whatever engagements you're gonna face. Take the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth for example. If I only dump a single Shield of Faith on the demogryphs, it's probably still not enough to save my demogryph knights from getting one shot by the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, as a mere 22% damage resistance means that they're still taking around 260 armor piercing damage, and coupled with the non-armor piercing damage as well as the anti-large bonus, charge bonus, and whatnot, the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth on a clean charge can probably still take down a few of my Demogryph Knights units with a single swing of his big ol' axe. So yeah, using buffs piecemeal is definitely not gonna make this build work. Instead, you should dump all the buffs onto the Demogryph's Knight at once, make sure they win the key engagements, and pull out as soon as the buffs wears off and the battle turns against you. And wait for a better opportunity to strike and pounce onto the enemy's weaknesses. And the third point is that make sure your Demogryph Knights are safe from the harm of armor-piercing missiles, as they are easy to be focused down and will require additional units to screen out these skirmishes. Even something as weak as a Chameleon Skin can do a number on them if they are separated and, say, netted. Always stay mobile and keep charging. Cycle charging is your best friend here, actually. And yeah, simply use this build, adjust some units to your liking, and watch the Demogryph Knights claw their way to your victory. This basically sums up the video for today, and I hope you like it. If you do, please like and subscribe, and I really appreciate any attention I can get. And yeah, if you have any thoughts about the build, please feel free to leave a comment down below, and if you have any new ideas for new builds as well, please let me know as well. I'll be sure to read the comments and promptly reply. That's basically it for today, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.